Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into words we hear, well, constantly, constitution and democracy.
Yeah, they're everywhere, aren't they?
Exactly. We use them, we debate them, but maybe what gets missed sometimes is their true dynamic nature, how they actually live and breathe within a society. So our mission today is to unpack these really foundational concepts of governance. We're drawing on some insightful work from Dr. Baidya at the Takshila Foundation. We're going to explore what a constitution truly represents. Beyond just a legal document, who it serves, its impact on our daily lives.
Right.
And then we'll dig into democracy, this complex, kind of evolving system, its essential characteristics, the different forms it takes, and, well, the big challenges it's facing right now.
And that's really key, because these aren't just dusty definitions in a textbook. They're the bedrock of a nation's identity, its stability, how citizens actually get involved in shaping their own future. So this deep dive should hopefully give you that nuanced understanding that's often missing from, everyday chats.
Yeah, help connect the dots a bit more.
Exactly. Connect to the structures that govern our lives.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the Constitution. We hear it referenced all the time, especially, in arguments and debates.
Constantly.
But what often gets overlooked, I think, is this dual nature. It's not just rules, it's like a living contract almost. So what's one aspect of its core definition people often get, well, maybe a bit wrong?
Well, I think it's often misunderstood as just, a historical document, something old.
Right, static.
Yeah, static. But really, at its core, a constitution is the nation's supreme legal framework. It defines the structure, the powers, and crucially, the limitations of government.
Limitations, right.
And at the same time, it outlines the fundamental rights and, yes, duties of its citizens. The surprising bit for many is that in a modern constitutional republic, the Constitution itself is sovereign.
So not a king, not a president.
Exactly. It's the supreme authority.
Okay, that idea of the Constitution as the supreme authority, it's powerful. But then it makes you wonder, right? If it's so supreme, why do we see so many countries struggle with governance even when they have one?
Good question.
Our source suggests that ultimately the people hold the real sovereign power, that the Constitution is essentially a social contract. So how does that idea, the people being supreme, how does that practically limit state power even with a Constitution?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. The most crucial function, arguably, is to limit state power precisely to prevent tyranny.
Okay.
Think of it like a master-servant dynamic, or maybe principal-agent is a better analogy.
Right.
We, the people, we're the principals, the masters, essentially. The state is our agent, supposed to be serving at our will. The U.S. Constitution, for example, makes this pretty clear. Power rests with the people.
So it's like we're hiring the government.
In a way, yeah. It's that social contract idea. We agree to be governed under certain terms, and in return, the state guarantees our rights. Think about paying taxes. That's kind of your part of the deal. And in return, you expect services, protection, that sort of thing. It's this continuous, often implicit agreement shaping our daily interactions.
Okay, so beyond just limiting power, preventing the worst-case scenario, what are the other core jobs a constitution does for a country?
Yeah.
Is there one purpose you think people tend to overlook?
Oh, definitely. It's multifaceted. So first, obviously, it establishes governance, defines the political structure, how power is shared between branches.
The basics.
The basics, yeah. Second, it ensures stability. It gives a framework for resolving disputes, maintaining law and order. Third, protecting rights, that's huge. Guaranteeing individual freedoms while balancing them with duties to the state.
Right, rights and responsibilities.
Exactly. Fourth, and this is the one I think often gets overlooked, it helps express national identity.
How so?
Well, it reflects the unique heritage, the aspirations, the collective wisdom, of the people. Many see it just as dry law, but it really tries to capture who a nation wants to be.
Interesting, like a mission statement.
Sort of, yeah. And finally, it provides ways to adapt. Mechanisms like amendments, so it can evolve as society changes.
That's a great point. So if it's expressing this identity and setting the rules, who exactly is it written for? Who's the main audience?
Well, it's drafted for the whole nation, really, but you can break it down. Primarily, it's for citizens, protecting their rights, outlining responsibilities.
Okay.
Then it's for governments themselves, defining their powers, and just as importantly, their limits.
Got it.
And finally, and this is crucial, it's drafted for future generations. It provides that connection long after the original drafters are gone.
Which leads to the big question. How does one of these things actually get made? What's the usual process? And who really needs to have a say?
Generally, it starts with forming a constituent assembly. That means representatives selected or elected from ideally diverse groups across society.
Not just the usual suspects.
Hopefully not. Then they do a lot of study and research, look at other constitutions, get input from historical experts, legal minds, cultural folks.
Homework phase.
Big homework phase. Then comes the actual drafting, articulating principles, writing the articles, debating them fiercely, usually.
I bet.
Public consultation is vital too. Gathering opinions through, say, referendums, town halls, written submissions. And for real legitimacy, the final nod often needs to come from the people. A referendum again, maybe?
So we, the people, actually approve it.
Ideally, yes. And who should give input? It really needs to be broad. Representatives from all sections of society, experts, yes, but also civic groups, minority voices, indigenous groups, even philosophers and visionaries thinking about the long term.
That makes sense. Now, one of the most fascinating things you mentioned, and our sources stress this, is that constitutions need to evolve. Unlike, say, a religious text, they have to adapt. Why is that adaptability so vital?
It's absolutely critical because societies don't stand still, right?
Right.
Constitutions have to reflect and adapt to changes. These could be internal things, economic shifts, cultural developments, changes in social attitudes, or external influences, globalization, wars, colonization, big technological leaps.
Like the internet, for example.
Exactly. Things the original drafters couldn't possibly have foreseen. Look at the U.S. Constitution. It's textually quite rigid, but its interpretation has evolved massively over time, mostly through the courts, through judicial review. That's what keeps it relevant, even centuries later. Without that ability to evolve, a constitution just becomes a historical artifact, not a living guide for a modern society.
Which brings us neatly to this idea our source calls flaws of omission. Basically, critical things get missed or ignored during drafting, and it causes problems down the line. India and the U.S. are used as key examples. What are these major oversights, and how do they actually manifest?
Yeah, these omissions can have really long-lasting consequences. Let's take historical context. India's constitution, for instance, borrowed a lot from the old Colonial Government of India Act of 1935, which led to criticism later that it didn't fully incorporate or reflect India's own indigenous governance traditions. Contrast that with the U.S. Constitution, heavily influenced by things like the Magna Carta and European Enlightenment thinkers like Montesquieu and Locke. Different starting points.
Okay, so history matters. What else?
Heritage, culture, and traditions. Similar point, really. In India, those ancient democratic traditions were largely set aside for Western models.
Right.
In the U.S., the initial failure to even properly address indigenous governance systems, huge disenfranchisement resulted from that. If you overlook these deep cultural roots, you risk alienating big chunks of your own population.
Makes sense.
Then there's geography and demographics. Think about India's size and diversity. The Constitution set up a structure, but there have been ongoing struggles, balancing central power with regional autonomy. The sheer scale and variety demand flexibility.
Yeah, one size rarely fits all.
Exactly. Economic and technological considerations, too. The U.S. Constitution was revolutionary for its time, but it obviously didn't anticipate modern capitalism's complexities, massive inequality, or digital technology. This has meant lots of contentious amendments and court battles trying to make it fit today's world.
Playing catch-up.
Constantly. And finally, social structures and collective wisdom. In India, think about caste. The Constitution included reservations to address historical injustice, but those became, highly politicized over time. In the U.S., the original sin, the compromise over slavery, it showed the profound danger of ignoring fundamental social justice right there in the foundational document. As the source points out, neglecting these things can embed deep problems, inequality, inefficiency that fester for generations.
Wow. Okay, so circling back, the big takeaway here seems to be the Constitution isn't just legalese. It's really fundamentally a nation's moral compass, trying to guide its direction.
That's a great way to put it, a moral compass.
Now, behind every constitution, there's usually a deeper philosophy about how we should be governed. And for most modern societies, that philosophy is democracy.
Right.
But like constitution, democracy is a word we use all the time, maybe without always thinking deeply about it. Often it just gets boiled down to elections, right? Majority rule.
Yeah, that's a very common reduction.
But if you dig deeper,
Yeah.
there's a core idea there that's way more profound than just counting votes. How does this rule by the people idea really work beyond just the ballot box? And what's a common misunderstanding about what it even means?
Well, the common misunderstanding is that it just means voting for a leader every few years.
Right. Job done.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But at its absolute core, democracy means rule by the people. Political power resides fundamentally not with a king or a general or an elite group, but with the citizenry. And it's based on popular consent. The word itself tells you Greek. Demos, people, and praetos, power or rule. It's about empowering citizens, making sure government answers to them, not the other way around. And that plays out not just in elections, but in protecting rights, allowing protest, ensuring accountability, all sorts of ways.
It's kind of amazing how resilient that core idea has been, adapting across so many different cultures, but always coming back to some fundamental principles.
Yeah.
So what are those non-negotiables? What really designs a system as democratic?
There are about 10 core characteristics generally agreed upon. First, popular sovereignty. Ultimate authority rests with the people. Government operates by their consent.
The foundation.
Absolutely. Second, political equality. Every person has equal political rights. Your vote counts the same as anyone else's. Everyone should have an equal chance to participate.
Ideal, anyway.
The ideal, yes. Third, the rule of law. This is crucial. No one is above the law, not politicians, not the wealthy, nobody. Laws have to be applied fairly and consistently.
Okay, what's next?
Fourth, free and fair elections. They need to be transparent, genuinely competitive, held periodically, and citizens have to be able to vote freely without being forced or intimidated.
Makes sense.
Fifth, majority rule with minority rights. Decisions are usually made by majority vote, yes, but, and this is a big but, the rights of minorities, those who didn't vote with the majority, must be protected. You need safeguards against the tyranny of the majority.
It sounds like a tricky balance.
Oh, it's incredibly tricky. It's easy to say, but making sure a powerful majority doesn't just ignore or oppress smaller groups, that's a constant struggle in practice, a delicate, ongoing dance.
Okay, that's 5. What else?
Sixth, separation of powers. Executive, legislature, judiciary. It's not just a neat chart. It's a vital mechanism to prevent any one branch getting too much control. A hard-learned lesson from history.
Right, checks and balances.
Exactly. Though the real challenge is making sure those branches stay independent but can still work together effectively. Seventh, fundamental rights and freedoms. Guaranteeing things like free speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, a free press.
That's classic liberty.
The bedrock liberties. Eighth, accountability and transparency. Governments have to be responsible to the people they govern. Things like free media, independent watchdog institutions, they're essential for keeping things open and holding power accountable.
Keeping them honest.
Trying to. Ninth, pluralism and political competition. Having multiple political parties, diverse viewpoints, different groups competing for influence. That offers citizens real choices and provides more checks and balances.
Avoids a one-party state scenario.
Precisely. And 10th, finally, civic engagement and public participation. Democracy isn't just voting, it's citizens getting involved through community groups, public debates, advocacy, protests, contacting their representatives, active participation.
Wow, okay. That's a comprehensive list. So, given those are the core ideas, how does democracy actually look in the real world? Because it's not all the same everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Our source talks about different types.
That's right. It manifests in various forms. You have direct democracy, where citizens themselves make the decisions directly. Think ancient Athens or some Swiss referendums today.
Rare, though.
Very rare on a large scale. Much more common is representative democracy. That's where citizens elect representatives to make decisions for them, like in the US, India, the UK, Canada, most modern democracies.
Okay.
Then you have structural differences. Presidential democracy. The head of government, the president, is elected separately from the legislature. The U.S. and Brazil are good examples.
All right.
Contrast that with parliamentary democracy. Here, the executive branch, the prime minister and cabinet, usually comes from and is accountable to the legislature, the parliament. Think UK, Canada, India again, Germany.
Different power dynamics.
Very different. Then there's constitutional democracy, which emphasizes that the whole system is governed by a constitution limiting government power and guaranteeing rights. Germany and South Africa are often cited.
Got it.
Liberal democracy puts a strong emphasis on civil liberties, human rights, often alongside free markets. Canada, Sweden, Australia fit here. And finally, social democracy combines that democratic framework with strong social welfare policies. Think universal healthcare, education, robust safety nets. The Nordic countries are the classic examples.
So lots of flavors, but sharing those core ingredients we talked about.
Exactly. The core principles often remain, but the practical application, the institutions, can look quite different.
Now, despite being the dominant model, arguably, democracy seems to be facing some serious headwinds today. What are the big challenges our sources point to? What's threatening these systems?
Yeah, the challenges are significant and they're varied. We're seeing a definite rise in political polarization, meaning societies becoming deeply divided into opposing camps, often unwilling to compromise or even listen to each other. It can paralyze government and breed real animosity.
We see that.
Definitely. Corruption is a persistent problem, undermining public trust in democratic institutions and leaders. Then there's the whole issue of misinformation and fake news.
Huge now.
Huge. It spreads so fast online, making it incredibly hard for citizens to know what's true, to make informed decisions. It really poisons the well of public discourse. We're also seeing the rise of authoritarianism and populism. Leaders who sometimes use democratic means to gain power, but then work to erode checks and balances, undermine courts, attack the press, essentially weakening democracy from within.
A scary trend.
It is. Add to that voter apathy. If people don't participate, if turnout is low, it weakens the legitimacy of the whole system. Who is the government really representing?
Good point.
And finally, persistent economic inequality. When large segments of the population feel left behind, ignored, like the system isn't working for them, it breeds resentment and can make people vulnerable to anti-democratic appeals.
So a lot of pressures.
A lot. But it's important to stress, democracy isn't static. It's always been challenged. It's a dynamic, evolving system, and it can be strengthened through better civic education, encouraging active participation, reforming institutions to make them more resilient and responsive. It's not doomed, but it needs defending.
Right. So if we try to tie this all together,
Yeah.
the Constitution and democracy, they're not just abstract ideas. They're living concepts, aren't they? The Constitution is like that moral compass we mentioned.
Yeah.
And democracy is the ongoing effort, the philosophy that champions human dignity, freedom, equality.
Absolutely. I really like the idea of democracy as a continuous project.
A project.
Yeah, it's never really finished. It's a constant commitment to empowering people, making sure everyone's voice can matter somehow. It allows societies to adapt, to progress, hopefully, and even to correct their own mistakes through the power of the people. It needs constant upkeep, re-engagement from citizens.
It reminds you of Lincoln's famous words, doesn't it? Democracy is truly government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Couldn't say it better. That sums up the ideal perfectly.
So maybe here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. If a nation's constitution is its moral compass, and democracy is this continuous, unfinished project, how do we, as citizens, day to day, make sure the compass stays pointing true? And how do we ensure this project doesn't just stall, but keeps adapting, keeps moving forward in a world that's changing faster than ever?